You don't climb a cartel, you get processed by it. In every promotion, it comes with a shorter life expectancy. Today on Capital Misfires, I'm Jimmy, and we're breaking down how some of the most powerful cartel bosses in modern history didn't fall in quiet boardrooms. They fell in firefights, betrayals, ambushes, and even hospital rooms. 660 Marines in one city, helicopters firing into downtown streets. And here's what matters. These weren't random endings. They were structural failures inside criminal empires. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll notice a pattern most documentaries miss. Alright, let's get into it. Tony Tormenta. Antonio Ezequiel Cardenas Cuyen, better known as Tony Tormenta, took control of the Gulf Cartel after his brother Oziel was arrested. But here's the problem. The cartel's former enforcement wing, Los Zetas, had split off and turned into a war machine aimed straight at him. Tony responded the only way cartel leaders know how. He built his own private army, Los Escorpiones, ex-police, heavy weapons, armored convoys, brutal street tactics. For months, Mexican Marines tracked him across Tamaulipas. Multiple close calls, convoys shielding him, armored vehicles buying time. But by late 2010, the government escalated. Matamoros, his home turf, became ground zero. On November 5th, more than 660 Marines, backed by helicopters and armored units, surrounded downtown. Roadblocks sealed exits. Residents hid indoors while gunmen fought openly in the streets. Cartel sicarios hijacked buses to block military routes. Snipers positioned on rooftops. Over 300 grenades detonated during the clashes. That's not a skirmish, that's urban warfare. By afternoon, Marines located Tony inside a downtown building. Helicopters fired from above. Forces pushed through. Tony Tormenta and several bodyguards were killed. And within hours, retaliation across the state. Roadblocks, grenade attacks, shootouts. Los Zetas even hung banners mocking the Gulf Cartel, openly inviting Tony's men to switch sides, because in this world, loyalty expires fast, and the machine keeps moving. When leadership depends on force, survival depends on escalation. Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha. By 1989, Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, known as El Mexicano, had picked too many fights. Colombian government, DEA, the Cali cartel, FARC guerrillas, even former allies in the emerald trade. His empire began collapsing as rivals cooperated. The final hunt started when a police informant, secretly working with the Cali cartel, exposed his location. Authorities tracked him to Cartagena. He fled by boat with his son Freddy and several loyalists. But here's the twist. One of them was still feeding information to police. On December 15, 1989, two military helicopters carrying elite units launched the assault. At first, Gacha tried blending in, disguising himself as a farm worker. When helicopters circled overhead, he ran. Gunfight across open countryside. His son Freddy and several bodyguards were killed. Gacha escaped briefly in a red truck until he abandoned it and fled into a banana plantation. Cornered and wounded, he fired at a helicopter with a German submachine gun. Those shots revealed his position. Police returned fire from above. One bullet hit his leg, another struck his face. He was dead within minutes. 2 days later, nearly 15,000 people attended his funeral in Pacho. Power can attract crowds, but it doesn't guarantee survival. Here's what that tells you. Criminal empires don't collapse from pressure alone. They collapse when trust erodes. Pacho Herrera. In 1996, Helmer Pacho Herrera, one of the 4 top leaders of the Cali cartel, surrendered to Colombian authorities. Unlike Escobar's flashy violence, Cali operated quieter. Corruption, bribery, political influence. Less explosions, more envelopes. Pacho kept a low profile for years, but even behind bars, enemies don't disappear. Cali had fractured. The Norte del Valle cartel was rising. Rumors spread that Herrera had cooperated with authorities. On November 6, 1998, during a soccer match inside prison, a familiar face walked onto the field. Rafael Angel Uribe Serna. Not a stranger, an advisor, a longtime associate. Pacho reportedly stopped the game. They hugged, and in that moment, 7 shots to the head. Guards detained Uribe immediately. He later claimed Herrera had threatened his family. Investigators doubted it. Most believed Norte del Valle ordered the hit. Lesson? Even prison walls don't shield leadership in a collapsing empire. Once power fragments, proximity becomes vulnerability. Arturo Beltrán Leyva. Arturo Beltrán Leyva once worked inside the Sinaloa cartel alongside El Chapo. His family handled security and trafficking routes. But in 2008, after his brother, Alfredo, was arrested, the Beltrán Leyvas blamed El Chapo for tipping authorities. They split, formed their own cartel, allied with Los Zetas. Mexico turned into a battlefield between former partners. By late 2009, Arturo was a top government target. On December 11th, he hosted a lavish Christmas party in a mansion in Cuernavaca. Music, drinks, security posted outside. Mexican Navy Special Forces raided the house. Gunfight erupted. 3 of his men and a neighbor were killed. Arturo escaped, but 5 days later, intelligence located him again, this time in a luxury apartment. Another urban siege. 90 minutes, grenades, helicopters. Same ending. Arturo and 3 of his men dead. And the aftermath? Days later, gunmen murdered family members of a Marine killed in the raid, including his mother, after his funeral. A banner left at a kindergarten warned of further retaliation. When alliances are transactional, loyalty becomes temporary. And that's the pattern. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, known as El Señor de los Cielos, built a fleet of jets to move cocaine. At his peak, he was worth an estimated $25 billion. At scale, that's not trafficking, that's infrastructure. Jets, global routes, industrial-scale logistics. But by 1997, pressure was tightening. U.S. and Mexican authorities closing in, public protests growing louder, politicians under scrutiny. So he tried something different: plastic surgery. On July 4, 1997, he checked into Santa Monica Hospital in Mexico City to change his face. Major facial reconstruction, liposuction to alter his body shape. The plan? Disappear. The result? Complications during surgery. Whether medication reaction or equipment failure, something went wrong. In the early hours of July 5th, he was dead. Scale increases visibility. Visibility increases pressure. Not in a shootout, not in a raid, on an operating table. Rumors exploded. Many believed he faked his death. The government publicly displayed his body to shut that down. Months later, the 2 surgeons were found murdered. And the Juarez cartel? Immediate chaos. When a $25 billion empire loses its architect overnight, power doesn't settle quietly. It fractures, and every fracture creates opportunity. Ramón Arellano Félix. Ramón Arellano Félix was the enforcer of the Tijuana cartel. If something brutal needed to happen, his name was attached to it. He personally ordered massacres, including the 1998 killing of 19 members of the Castro Ramirez family. That reputation put him high on Mexico's most wanted list. In 1997, he was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Later, under the U.S. Kingpin Act, his American assets were frozen. But inside Mexico, he kept operating. Then, on February 10, 2002, in Mazatlan, everything changed. A Mexican police officer, Ángel Antonio Arias Torres, pulled him over for a routine traffic violation. Routine, that's the word. Ramón stepped out and shot the officer twice in the chest. Mortally wounded. But here's the part that feels unreal. Even as he collapsed, Arias fired back. One bullet hit Ramón in the head. Both men died in that exchange. Some accounts later suggested the stop wasn't random, that rivals may have tipped off authorities. There were even whispers that El Chapo had something to do with it. No definitive proof, but here's what is certain. Within weeks, Ramon's brother Benjamin was arrested. Within a few years, most of the Arellano Félix leadership was either dead or in prison. One traffic stop accelerated the fall of an entire organization. That's how fragile power really is. High-risk systems fail at random points, not predictable ones. Now watch what happens next. Francisco Rafael Arellano Félix. Fast forward to October 18, 2013. Francisco, the oldest of the Arellano Félix brothers, was celebrating his 64th birthday in Los Cabos. Around 80 to 100 guests attended, politicians, businessmen, athletes, low security, which honestly should have raised eyebrows. Just after 8 p.m., a man dressed as a clown entered the party. Yeah, a clown. He blended in, moved through the crowd, got within 3 feet, then pulled a pistol, shot Francisco in the head and chest, fired additional rounds as guests dove under tables. He escaped through a back exit to a waiting SUV. Gone. Authorities suggested possible revenge tied to old rivalries, maybe Sinaloa, maybe Beltrán-Leyva connections. Some believed he had angered El Chapo by tipping off authorities about his presence in Los Cabos the previous year. Security footage was limited. Guests left before full questioning. The motive? Still debated. But the symbolism? Clear. Retirement doesn't exist in decentralized violence markets. Heriberto Lazcano. Heriberto Lazcano wasn't a career criminal at first. He was a former Mexican Special Forces soldier. He defected, helped form Los Zetas, originally the enforcement arm of the Gulf Cartel. Eventually, they split and became one of the most violent groups in Mexico. By the late 2000s, Lazcano was among the most wanted men in the country. The U.S. offered $5 million for information. Mexico added another $2 million. On October 7, 2012, acting on a civilian tip about armed men at a baseball game, Mexican Marines moved in. Lazcano and a bodyguard opened fire from a white van. Shootout. Both were killed. One Marine also died. Fingerprint confirmation identified Lazcano. At the time, he was the most powerful cartel boss killed since the drug war intensified in 2006. But here's where it gets wild. His body was taken to a funeral home in Sabinas, Coahuila. Before officials made the death public, a convoy of masked gunmen stormed the building, overpowered staff, stole the corpse. Gone. Never recovered. It's militarized loyalty. Organizations built on militarized identity resist even symbolic defeat. But leadership vacuum doesn't stay empty. Lazcano's death cleared the way for Miguel Trevino to take control. He was captured less than a year later, and rivals, especially Sinaloa, expanded into former Zetas territory. The machine doesn't pause, it reallocates. This is where it shifts, because now we're looking at legacy. What happens after power peaks? Griselda Blanco. Griselda Blanco wasn't just involved in the Miami drug wars, she defined them. By the late 70s and early 80s, her cocaine operation was pulling in an estimated $80 million a month. But what made her infamous wasn't the cash, it was the violence. She ordered hundreds of killings, popularized motorcycle drive-by shootings. Even her own family wasn't safe. She allegedly ordered the murder of her first husband, shot her second husband herself, had the third killed over a custody dispute. In 1985, the DEA caught her in California. She served time, was released in 2004 for health reasons, deported back to Colombia. Later, she claimed she'd found religion, low profile, quiet life. Then, on September 3, 2012, leaving a butcher shop in Medellin, a man on a motorcycle pulled up. 2 shots to the head, executed in the exact style she helped make famous. Violence tends to standardize, and systems recycle the methods they normalize. Ignacio Nacho Coronel. Ignacio Nacho Coronel was a powerhouse, meth production, chemical supply chains, Sinaloa's backbone. By the late 2000s, both the US and Mexico wanted him badly. In 2010, after his young son was kidnapped and murdered, Coronel retaliated brutally. Over 100 men deployed, 14 people killed in days. That response put a spotlight on him he couldn't dodge. On July 29, 2010, Mexican Marines tracked him to a luxury home in Sopan. When they stormed it, Coronel fought back, killed one soldier, wounded another, then took a bullet in the head. Inside the house, weapons, grenades, luxury watches, and roughly $7 million in cash. Another empire cut at the knees. Scale doesn't guarantee durability, it just increases exposure. And now, we get to the name everyone remembers.
Pablo Escobar, December 2nd, 1993, Medellin. Escobar had been on the run for over a year after escaping his custom-built prison. The Colombian government wanted him, the US wanted him, the Cali cartel wanted him dead. And honestly, so did a lot of civilians. A phone call to his family gave away his position. Special forces closed in. Escobar tried to flee across the rooftops with his bodyguard. Gunfire erupted. He was hit multiple times. The final shot struck his head. Whether it came from police or himself is still debated. What isn't debated? That his death ended the Medellin cartel as a dominant force. More than 25,000 people attended his funeral, and the trade didn't stop for a second. Routes shifted, leadership reorganized, money kept flowing. Removing the figurehead doesn't dismantle the structure. Here's the part people don't like. There's no final boss level, no retirement package, no clean exit, no victory lap. Every story we covered ends the same way. A bullet, a betrayal, a cell, or an operating table. The names change, the flags change, the accents change, but the system? It doesn't retire. It processes the next name. That's why we break this stuff down on Capital Misfires. This was Jimmy, and you were watching Capital Misfires. If you made it all the way to the end, I appreciate you, seriously. If you liked this breakdown, hit that like button so more people see it. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into how power really works behind the scenes. And drop a comment telling me which story hit you the hardest. Was it the rooftop, the traffic stop, or the operating table? I read the comments, so let me know. I'll see you in the next one.